Hi, everyone. Welcome to the God Attachment Healing Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Landa. This podcast is dedicated to helping Christians who want to understand why they relate to God, themselves, and the church in the way that they do. I explore how our early childhood experiences with our parents influence how we relate. I discuss how we can find healing from the pain, confusion, doubt, fear, and anger experienced in these relationships. If you're interested in learning more about your attachment style and how to heal from the pains and struggles you've experienced, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to the show. I'm happy you're here. Well, welcome back, everybody, to the God Attachment Healing Podcast. I'm here with a friend of mine, Christy Cooper. This is Tyler Cooper's wife, and I interviewed Tyler Cooper a couple of months ago on the same topic of how to trust God during times of difficulty. And Christy agreed to do this episode, and I'm sure that it's going to be a blessing because it's going to get the woman's perspective, the mother's perspective on what it's like to go through this process. So, Christy, thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share, in a sense, our story of our losses and hard times, but I'm always looking for opportunities to share it. So I appreciate you having me on here.
Yeah, absolutely. And we go way back. I knew Tyler and Christy way back in old school church, and they did youth ministry, young adult ministry together, and then they moved a couple of times. And it seems like you guys have now found a place where you're settling in.
Oh, we are for sure settled here in Virginia. Yeah, we're not going anywhere.
Good. And you still have family? Is family close by, or are they?
Yeah, so I grew up in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and I told God I would never live here after I moved out in college, but look where I am now. My kids are in the same Christian school that I went to.
Really?
My family's all here. Yeah, and my family's all here. Tyler has a job he loves. Mm-hmm. I have a business here, so we are very happy that God did not listen to me and directed us back here.
Yes. That's crazy how that works. How we tell God no and he does the opposite. Often.
Right.
That's good. And what are you doing? You said you have a business that you're working on. I know I had seen posts about that before, but would you mind telling the audience a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I decided when we moved to Fredericksburg, I had some work group before where I had worked at places, but I didn't like the fact it's healthcare. I'm an occupational therapist. I oftentimes found myself having to choose between my job and my ethics. And so I decided I'm a mom with 2 kids under the age of 2, and I want flexibility, and I don't want to put my I didn't want to choose between my job and my ethics. So I decided, why not start my own business? So I started a community and home-based occupational therapy practice where we work with kids in their homes and in their schools. So it's just a small business, me and a couple other therapists, and we're all moms just doing a little bit of work trying to raise our kids. So
that's awesome. Awesome. And that's what you went to school for, and it's cool that you were able to use that as a business to open up a business.
Yes.
And keep your ethics and values at heart.
Yeah, and it's really nice because we don't shy away from the fact that we are a Christian business. Mm-hmm. All of the therapists are Christians with a biblical worldview, and we get to tell parents, yeah, your child has weaknesses, but God has created them with the brain and the ability to make new connections, and they don't have to stay they don't always have to have these struggles. We can, change this because of the way God's made our bodies. So. Awesome. It's neat to be able to see it as a ministry.
Oh yeah, and you're ministering to both the parents and to the children, so that's a really cool part of it as well. And I think oftentimes you see yourself kind of speaking to the children through the parents because you're also training the parents how to respond and so on. So it's really cool. Yep. Well, Christy, we are doing this interview for a very difficult topic for a lot of people out there, either because it's not talked about as much, or when it is, it's people don't really know how to respond to it, right? And we're talking about miscarriage and losing a child, and knowing that you've experienced that, you and Tyler have experienced that twice. And you were talking earlier about kind of that's a rarity, right? So before kind of diving into that, one of the things I think helps a lot of people understand a little bit of background is how do we grow up, or what were we taught by our parents growing up? Because that shapes how, in a lot of ways, how we respond to the trials of life. So, if you don't mind sharing, just a little bit of background of what it was like growing up for you with your parents, kind of what did they teach you about God, that maybe helped you throughout this situation a couple of years ago?
Okay, yeah. When I first got your question of, what did I learn from my parents? I'm like, well, I have no idea where to even start, and I couldn't really think of anything that they actually said.
Mm,
But the things that came to my mind is that my parents saw and cared for people physically and spiritually, and it was how they lived that out. So my mom was gifted with the gift of hospitality,
mm.
um, and so my dad and her would find out that there's a family in need who needs a home, and we had no idea that, like, at dinner one night, a family of 6 was going to show up with their dog, and they were going to stay for 9+ months and live with
Oh,
us.
wow.
Like, that just happened on
Mm,
occasion a couple times growing up.
mhm.
Um, and it's because my parents saw somebody in need, and they truly believe and lived out the fact that their home and their financial resources are not theirs. They are the Lord's, and they're stewards of them. So I think that's where I saw my parents meet physical needs of people, just like
Mhm.
God sees our physical and spiritual needs. And then my dad, specifically with spiritual needs,
Mm,
my dad is very involved in what's called CBMC, or Christian Businessmen's Connection. And
mm.
basically, it's evangelizing and discipleship of men in the business world. So
Wow.
he's been really involved in that. And, from a young age, he hung out with unbelievers, and he would pray
Mm,
for these men fervently, either until they accepted the Lord or until they died. Every day, he would pray
wow.
for them. And so I think that the thing that really sticks out to me is, and what they've taught me by their actions, is that God sees and cares for us, and
Mhm.
we need to do the same.
Mm,
So,
mhm.
and I think that
Especially,
that will tie back later when I talk a little bit more about some of these other questions, but that's
yeah,
what
yeah.
interests me.
It was really interesting that you said they didn't really tell me anything, but I saw a lot. I saw them do ministry with their hands. Like I saw the things that they did, and that
Yeah.
influenced me. And it's interesting because I think when we go through the experience, or when we see people go through a miscarriage or the loss of a child, like instead of, our natural inclination is to try to say the right thing, right? But the inclination, what seems to help more, is presence, right?
Mhm.
Presence and action. So in those situations, we see a lot of love and grace from people. So, what experiences have taught you about God's love and grace? It sounds like you had very loving parents, very minister heart oriented. But yeah, do you have any other experience that taught you about God's love and grace?
Yeah, I think anybody who's married will say, like, it takes love and grace to
Mm-hmm.
work and have a marriage that lasts, and that's true. I think for Tyler and I, we've been married for 11 years, and
Mm-hmm.
super grateful for this gift of marriage. But I think over the last 3.5 years, so we lost our daughter Trinity in April
Mm-hmm.
2020, and then our son Josiah in May 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And I think overall, we did things well as far as grieving. But when we're both sinners and we're human and we're hurting, we're going to say and react in ways that
Mm-hmm.
require the other person to give love and grace. So I think we've seen God's love and grace from other people he's brought into our lives, especially over the last few years, but just even in our
Mm-hmm.
marriage and towards one another, especially in these darker times, we've seen that.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great. That's really good. And you're right, sometimes that's what flushes out those aspects that maybe we also are working through. Um, one of the biggest things that I think I heard was how men and women experience the loss of a child or going through a miscarriage. Men tend to kind of isolate, kind of be thinking to themselves and thinking of solutions or something like that, and maybe even get too involved in work and kind of use that as a mild distraction. And maybe for moms, it's like you're carrying the child for a number of weeks, months, and so on. So you're building this connection, and it's a different experience. At least it seems like that. But can you share a little bit about that? Like, what were the differences, or how did you feel? And then make a contrast to what you were seeing in Tyler and how he was responding to it.
So yeah, there's definitely been differences. I think in the beginning, we both reacted the same. We're just shocked. We're just crushed. We don't know what the next step is or how we're going to move forward. But I am so thankful. I think Tyler might have shared this when he was on, but we had a couple who we were more acquaintances with. We didn't know them great, but they were from our church. And they immediately reached out to us, like within days, and shared with us that they had a stillborn. I think it was like 8 or 10 years prior. And they just said, expect for the grieving to look the same at first, but you guys are going to start grieving differently because of how you're wired, men and women, and do not become resentful of one another when that happens. And I am so thankful that we were given that advice, because if we had not been, I can totally see myself becoming very upset with Tyler because he grieved by keeping himself busy and doing dishes and playing with the kids. And he wasn't like, he cried, but not like I was sobbing, and I just could not function. And I'm like, what's wrong? I would have been, did you not love our baby? Like I loved our baby, had somebody not said that to me. But what I came to understand is when Tyler was vacuuming and doing the dishes and mowing the lawn and just keeping busy, that was his way of grieving. And he might as well have been sobbing in bed with me. It just looked different. So that's one big difference. You had also mentioned it is different because we carried that baby. Regardless of how long we did, it does change, I think, with the time. I want to be careful how I say this. With the time that you are pregnant, you feel more of that baby as they develop. So it is going to be different. There are some people that I want to be careful, because some people have come out and said, well, I didn't want to tell you that I've experienced this because I was only 8 weeks or 13 weeks. And
that's fair, yeah.
To me, as believers, we believe in life at conception. So if you're like 1 week gestation or 20 weeks gestation or 40 weeks gestation, that is a life worth celebrating and a life worth grieving just the same. So but with that said, so the grief is grief, regardless of how far along we were, but it is different as far as how your body responds and connects. For me, I was far enough along where I had felt flutters. And so when I was no longer pregnant, my body would still play tricks on me, and I still felt pregnant sometimes. And I still felt like I was movement. Yeah, so like a phantom movements.
Yes.
And so that along with, I don't know that people always think through it. And again, it's different with every story. But for me, I ended up having to deliver both of our babies. And so there was still that same postpartum healing that happens after you have a normal birth, or like milk comes in and you have this reminder that you're supposed to feed a baby, but there is no baby for you to feed. So there, for the woman, is I guess a gift in a sense. For the men, I don't know, it depends on how you view it. There's this constant physical reminder of what you don't have, and to make matters worse, your body is playing tricks on you, it feels like. So I think those, and then just another difference that comes to mind is the dates. I think it's a gift that God has given men to not remember, or maybe it's just my man, I don't know. But he knows around the same times, but like I remember every date, like the date that we had the ultrasound, that, where we heard those terrible words, the date that we delivered, the date that we buried our child, the due date, like all of the dates times 2. I remember them all. And, we're 2 and 3 years removed, but even like we just had Trinity's third anniversary of her burial, July 18th, just a few days ago.
Oh, wow.
And all of July, this was in my mind. I was already grieving in the 1st of July. Tyler wouldn't have been aware until I told him, which is not a fault of his. It's just that we're different.
Yeah, that's a huge difference. And you explained that very well, the aspect of physically changing, mentally. What about spiritually, Christy? Did anything spiritual change? I know, when people go through difficult times, one of the things that you start to see that's I don't know if I wouldn't say exposed, but that comes out is their view of God changes. Maybe because it's happened once and it was really tough, or if something continues to happen, like our view of God starts to change. And I'm wondering if you noticed anything in the way that you started to view God. Like if you had a high view of God, did that lower? Or if you had a lower view of God, did it get better? Like, can you walk us through that experience?
Sure. I think that overall it positively affected my view of God. And I already had a positive view of God, but I think that through these experiences, I learned to feel what I knew to be true. Like God is present. God comforts us. He is going to heal us. It might take time. I am still, well, you're the professional. I am still in the healing phase of this, I feel like. So we knew, so I just vividly remember, especially, well, both experiences, but our first experience with loss was when we had lost Trinity, and laying in that hospital room, and this was our first time ever having to face this, and acknowledging that Tyler and I just had a very clear conversation. This is a great opportunity for Satan to get in and divide us and try to cause problems in our marriage. And our babies, death is the result of sin. Our babies are gone because of sin. And there is no way that we were going to let the deaths of our children allow the devil to get the foothold in our marriage or with us personally in our walk with the Lord, because that had already taken our child from us, if that makes any sense. I don't know if I said that clearly. But so we just decided, we can either turn from God, all that we know to be true, or we can lean in together into the promises that we know, as He is the only one that is going to sustain us and walk through it with us and comfort us and heal us. And so overall, I think it positively changed my view, not changed, but enhanced, I guess, my view of God. Now, and we also chose names of our children so that anytime that we say their name or think of them, we're reminded of the promises of God. Wow. So that's kind of part of what I have to share. Trinity alone is a prime example of because God the Father loved us, He sent His Son Jesus so that we can have the hope of eternity with our entire family together, knowing that the Holy Spirit is going to be at work within us as Christians to help us as we move through these times and intercede for us when we're speechless.
Wow. So. That's powerful, Christy. That's powerful. And with the names, you're right. They carry this weight of meaning. And was the name chosen before? I know some parents wait till the baby is born to name the child, or they do it before. Did you guys have the name chosen before or afterwards?
So I believe that God placed the name Trinity. Her middle name is Elise, Trinity Elise, and Elise means pledge to God. He put that name on my heart when I was pregnant with our first son, but then we went on to have 2 healthy living sons, so Ellie and Cohen, and then I didn't have a daughter. We decided Tyler and I don't agree on names at all. Right. So
that sounds common.
After our first son, we decided we're never going to look at names until we know what sex the baby is. So that will just cut our battles in half automatically.
Yeah, yeah.
So when we went to the anatomy scan for Trinity, we hadn't really talked about it.
Mhm.
Trinity Elise is always a name that I've loved since I was pregnant with my first.
Mm.
And so we did not know until we delivered her if she was going to be a girl or a boy. And we had very limited time to come up with a name. And so we just, Trinity Elise is like the perfect name for her because of what the Trinity is going to mean to us. And anytime we talk about her, we get to share the gospel. And then Elise means pledge to God. Again, I didn't know that this was going to be for her story. I didn't know that this name was going to be hers with her story. But pledge to God, I mean, our children, as much as we love them, they're not ours. And it's such a reminder that we are stewards of the time that we have with them, whether it is 8 weeks gestation or 60 years, whatever. We're stewards of our children, and they belong to God.
Yeah.
I mean, and then we named Josiah after we lost Trinity. We did not wait. We ended up getting blood work done at 9 weeks, so we knew the sex of him. So we did name him immediately, and his name means God heals or supports. And it was our prayer that God would heal and support us, and by this gift of a new baby. God did not answer our prayer the way we wanted him to, but it's still a reminder that even though he didn't answer it the way we had hoped and wanted, that God is still for us, and he is still here, and he is still healing us, and he is still here to support us. So there's that's the answer I have.
No, that's good. I mean, I think, like I said, I think a lot of people who are listening are going to connect with that, because especially, so if you're listening right now, be sure to look back at or listen to Tyler's experience so you can see how both these, because I think it's going to help both parents in a lot of ways kind of cope with this. This happens 1 out of 4 pregnancies, right, Christy? And then you said the second time, what was the percentage for it to happen again?
So the chance of a miscarriage happening after the first trimester is less than 1%. So, after we lost Trinity, we had, because I had issues with blood pressure in my previous pregnancies with her, we immediately started going to a high-risk doctor just to monitor my blood pressure. So we were actually gifted with extra ultrasounds and times that we got to see her on ultrasound before she passed away. But it's less than 1% chance. And so everything was healthy. Like, she was a healthy little girl. We had no answers. Usually it's like a chromosomal issue or a blood clotting disorder with the mother. I've gone to all these specialists and there's just no answer. And so we were told it's just a fluke and you can go ahead and have another healthy pregnancy. So with that, thinking, well, it's less than 1% chance. What's the chances it would happen again? We tried to have another baby. And then we lost him at 16 weeks. Again, everything was healthy. Chromosomally, everything was fine. We just have to, I think a lot of times for me, it would be a lot easier to process if I had an answer. But I've had to learn to just trust that I'm not going to know and be okay with that. But sometimes that's a struggle.
And I bet that's hard. I mean, the experience itself, and then you hear the statistic and that gives you like this hope, right? Like, this is going to work out fine. And then it happens. So for yourself, was there any difference for you between the first loss and the second loss? Like, did you respond differently? Did you expect it? I think Tyler spoke about, because I had gone through it, I felt more prepared, he said.
Yes, yes, but there was a lot of hard steps, especially for me, that we had to go through. So for the first, hearing the words "no heartbeat," it's just crushing. And then you realize you have to tell your children that there is no sibling coming home. And then you have to, I just remember sitting in the car sobbing and making all the phone calls to all the people that were waiting, all the family, and having to tell them over and over again the news, and having to go and tell our children our baby died, but God is still good and he still cares for us, even when we don't feel it in the moment. And then I had to deliver the baby. And what people may not know is that for a person who is far enough along where they have to deliver their baby, they're in the delivery ward where they're hearing other people having babies, other newborns crying. And the hospital we had, there was a Twinkle Twinkle Little Star played over the loudspeakers every time a baby was born. And I'm laying there waiting to deliver my baby who's not going to be alive. So there's all of these hard things. And then like I think thankfully we got to hold our babies. It was sweet and terrible all at the same time, where in a sense, I'm thankful that I had the opportunity. Had I been somebody in my first trimester, you don't get that opportunity. Yeah. But then you have to hand your baby over knowing you're never going to see them again. And because our babies were not 20 weeks by the medical field, they are considered just like they were going to go out with the trash. But I was like, no, this is a baby and we're going to treat her with dignity or him with dignity. And so I had to figure out, while I'm waiting to deliver this baby, do I cremate? Do we bury? Where do we bury? How much is it going to cost us? And like all of these ins and outs, just trying to fight for the dignity of their life, Wow. Like Tyler said, there's even more just hard things. Like Tyler was going to get the car, but I had to be wheeled out through the maternity ward with my little white memory box of like their hand and feet molds. And I felt like, as a mom, a failure. Like I felt like a sore thumb sticking out. And nobody was actually judging me, but I felt judged. I felt like my body didn't do what it was supposed to do, and I was a failure, being wheeled out with my little white box instead of my baby. So when it came to Josiah, I already knew all the hard things we were going to have to do. I already knew that my body was going to play tricks with my mind. So in that sense, it made it more bearable. But it didn't make it any less hard, because grief is grief and the babies are different babies. Yeah. They're different lives worth celebrating, different hopes. And, we were excited for this baby. So in that sense, it just made it more bearable that we already knew all the hard things that were to come.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Ooh, that's heavy, Christy. It's heavy. I'm sure a lot of people are connecting with that and empathizing with the situation. Now you said 3 years since then?
So we lost Trinity in 3 years in April, and then Josiah was 2 years.
2 years, yeah. And how do you reflect on that today? So I'm trying to think of, if I have something that's very vivid for me and that's memorable, like I remember, for example, when Bo was born. He was our firstborn, right? And I remember the whole scene and everything. But the other aspect, I don't feel like I was when I was there at that time. Do you feel, thinking back on their memory, do you feel the exact same way? Like when their anniversary comes up, do you get all the feels, or do you process differently? What does that look like?
It's definitely, I personally still have hard days, especially leading up to all of the different dates that I remember. But I will say the first year is the hardest, getting through all the first holidays and getting through your first due date, like getting through the date, because when you, as a woman, I miscarried at 18 weeks, right? 18 and a half weeks. So in April, but from April through September, I was supposed to be pregnant. I was still married, pregnant. I was, and so in my mind, I still felt like I should still be pregnant now. And so once that first due date came, there was another sense of closure. Besides burying our children brought some closure. Definitely did not move on. Like it was not like we married and we're good. Like that's not the case at all, but we were able to move forward a bit more. But getting past that due date was a good, healthy weight lifted. Now, and people do it differently, and it's not wrong. Some people don't talk about their babies in heaven with their family or with their kids or with each other very often. And that's okay. Tyler and I have chosen to just make it feel normal. We have pictures and things to remember them around the house. So it's a normal part of our conversation. So I think with each passing time, it's definitely not the same, because those raw moments, those raw days and raw months are behind. More so than anything, there's a sweetness, and we look forward to heaven more. And our kids are now 7 and 5, and if somebody asks them, you know, do you have any brothers and sisters, they'll include Trinity and Josiah in that answer. And so it's not like as heartbreaking and crushing to talk about it anymore, like what we don't have. It's more of, they're part of our family and we love them. And there's more of a sweetness to knowing that we get to have eternity with them. And the kids will talk about, like, I wonder, you know, if Trinity and Josiah, you know, are fishing with Jesus today or something like that. Like, we create sweet, new and sweet memories of what might be and what will be one day, and what the kids look forward to doing with their brother and sister one day. So I think there's definitely like a more sweetness, but for me, it's like you probably know this because you're a professional, but like, there's something in my brain that just triggers a remembrance of, hey, a due date's coming up and you're a month out. It's like right at a month before a date happens, I get triggered, and then I kind of grieve quietly to myself. I'm not like bawling. Sometimes I still do, but not as often. But it's weighs on me. And it's usually the day of is much better.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of prep work, emotionally, your body feels it and so on. I heard one person give this example or illustration of grief. He says it's this memory that you carry with you all of the time. And when you look at it, it reminds you of the goodness of God, right? But for other people, and this is kind of this other aspect of, you know, there's mothers probably who listen who either are not Christian or who are in a difficult spot right now. So maybe they've turned away from the Lord, whatever the case is. For them, what are some of the negative thoughts that you've heard other mothers talk about? Because maybe their faith wasn't strong enough at the time. And I have heard and seen this happen where some mothers now, they want nothing to do with God. God, you took away my baby. Why would you do that? You know, here we are. We've been faithful to you. So that's why I was asking earlier about, you know, how did it change your view of God? Have you interacted with other moms who maybe had that type of response, whether it be presently now in your church or before? Have you seen any reactions like that?
I have not. The only interactions I've really had are with people who have at least shared their experience with me that I know of. Are believers who are strong in their faith. Now, even as believers, I have a whole list of negative thoughts that we have, because we all have those. And there's definitely moments where there is anger towards God. I would be telling a lie if I said I was never angry about it. But I couldn't stay there.
Sure.
You know, there are times where I still have to, you know, fight. And I'm assuming people that don't have a faith in Jesus still have to fight too, like of just jealousy and resentment of the people who do have their babies with them. Even though you would never want this, you don't want this on your worst enemy to occur. But I think what is able to happen is you can be sad for yourself and still happy for other people. There's definitely lies that can creep into our headspace, and then they have crept into mine as well, that are not from God. And I think that's just where, as an unbeliever, you don't have that. And as a believer, I think if you walk away from God in those hard moments, like you said, I just wonder how strong your faith was to begin with.
Yeah. And you know, it's okay. I think it's okay, and you've alluded to this, to normalize the thoughts and emotions that come, because that's part of our fallenness. Like, you're gonna get negative thoughts, you're gonna have questions that are
Yeah.
unanswered, you're gonna have emotions that you don't want to feel. But you made a point of, but I had to work through it. I didn't want to stay there, which involves a level of allowing God to do some work, and also we're reminding ourselves of God's promises. But so the audience can maybe get a picture of what those kind of phrases or thoughts were. What were some of those negative thoughts that were coming in, or
So
emotions?
a lot of it had to do with guilt. Like, is this my fault? What could have
Mm,
or should have I done differently? How did I not know that my baby was dying inside of me?
wow.
And we're connected, and I didn't know, like, did they suffer and it wasn't my fault? Like, I didn't even know to sing to them or talk to them, because like, and even if it's a ridiculous thought, it's still a true
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah.
Whether we know, like, I may know, and people tell me it's not your fault, and I know that logically,
Hmm.
but I still feel like it's true
Yeah.
sometimes. And so I think that that's a big part of it. And even, like, does God, like I talked about my parents,
Mm.
caring and seeing people like God cares and sees for us. Does God care, and does he see me? Because right now,
Mm.
especially when this happened twice, I feel like, yes, my babies are safe in the arms of God, and, like, they were born into his presence, and he loves and cares that for them. But is he seeing me?
Hmm.
Sometimes I feel like he's not. And so I think one of the things that Tyler and I did to combat that is that we purposely looked for the silver lining when anything big or small happened, or people stepped in. We're like, that's evidence of God's love for us and care for us.
Hmm.
Whether that was like little memorial gifts, or somebody anonymously donated a lot of money to cover our burial expenses.
Hmm.
um, Big or small, whether even it was just a note in the mailbox, like remembering that God loves and sees us. Now, that is a still a thought, if I'm being honest, that still creeps
Hmm.
into my head now. Like, we're 3 and 2 years out. I cannot expect other people to remember all of the dates that I remember. It's not realistic for them, and it's not their job. But it does make me feel sometimes like, well, nobody remembers, so does God care?
Yeah.
But I know that's not true. And then, God will usually do something to remind me that he still sees me. So when it is their heavenly birthday, we make them a cake. The boys decorate a cake, and we get a
Mm.
balloon, and we put it out there where they're buried together.
That's
And so for Trinity's third heavenly birthday, I went into a store that I never go into. So I couldn't find the cake mix aisle. And I decided I don't have time. I'm just going to ask somebody for directions to the cake aisle.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked this lady and looked at her name tag, and it said Trinity. And
Oh,
I was like,
wow.
this is not a very popular name.
Yeah.
And I never come to this store. And I think it's little things like that where I feel like God just had our paths cross, just
Mm.
to remind me, it's been 3 years, but Christy, I see you, and I care for you. And this
Mhm.
is just my little reminder that, like, God had us, meet that day.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love when that happens, those little
Yeah.
reminders throughout the day. Yeah, that's great. Um, so, I think one of the things that happens a lot is not feeling connected to the people. One of the things that Tyler shared a lot, he said you guys had a really great community, and actually, there's a lot of data that supports the idea that when someone goes through a traumatic experience, that they have support either before, during, or after. They're able to cope a lot better. And it sounds like you guys had a really good support system
Mhm.
there at your church. So I'm really thankful for that.
We
Um,
did.
and so personally, scripture, prayer, community, all of those things, what would you say would be most helpful for someone as they're coping? Because we don't want Job's friends to show up when something heartbreaking like this happens, right?
Right.
Where they start even filling in those thoughts, right? You said earlier that I felt like if it was my fault, like I should have known or something like that.
Mhm.
And someone might say something that, in trying to be supportive, they actually reinforce or kind
Mhm.
of put more weight by repeating this message that you're already saying to yourself, right?
Yeah.
So what can people do to comfort those who are going through a difficult time like this?
Like what not to do kind of
Yeah, so
thing.
what can those who have not experienced it, because again, the fact that it happens 1 in 4, you're either going to meet someone or you've already met someone who's experienced this, right?
Or you are,
So
yeah.
or you are. And so what is something that you would say to someone to help them understand how to help those who are going through this process? What to say, what not to say, or what to do, what not to do.
Well, let me start with the big one of what
Okay.
not to say,
What
because
not to say.
this is a very popular one.
Okay.
Do not say to the grieving mother, well, my friend so and so has had 5 or 7 miscarriages and then went to have another baby, or they've had 5 or 7 miscarriages, period.
Ugh.
That is they are trying to make you feel better in a very wrong way.
Wow.
It's sad for them. We're grieving. We, in this moment, do not need more sad news. Also, it completely makes us feel like you are not seeing me and my baby. The death of my baby is not important because you're just overriding that with the fact that, like, well, that was just 1 or that was just 2, but my friends had 5 or 7. So their heart is to give you something worse and make you feel better because it's not as bad as. But you're negating the fact that their baby mattered, or that's how it feels.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is do not assume too much time has passed to check in with a mom. I've heard some people say, well, I don't want to ask because I might make them think of their baby and that would make them sad. Guess what? We are always thinking of our children, the ones with us and the ones in heaven. I maybe on a really busy day, I don't know that there has been an hour that has gone by where I haven't thought of my children. And maybe that's not healthy. Maybe I need to do counseling more, but it's not in sadness that I think of them anymore. It's like a butterfly or a dandelion are our things that remind us of our 2 kids. And it's anything. Or if I see a mom and a daughter, like I was this close to having a mom and daughter relationship. So, we're already thinking about our children. Yeah. What hurts is when people just assume or they move on and they don't ask. So
why do you think that is, Christy? Why do you think it's that they don't ask? You think they're afraid of something, or what do you think is going on there?
Awkwardness, maybe. I mean, I've had some people who also, even we're so removed from it. Not so. We're a few years removed from it. I have a couple friends who have, I'm sure, don't have it memorized themselves, but I'm sure they've taken the time to save the dates in their Google Calendar. And so they get reminders. So I don't think that people necessarily will remember or ask me all the time right now about it. But in the first year, check in with your friends and ask them how they're doing. Don't be afraid to ask them. I think one of the most hurtful things that I experienced is when some of my friends just didn't know what to say or how to talk to me. And so they just didn't say anything at all. They never reached out to me in any way because I just didn't know. So don't not say anything. Okay. Even though it's awkward for you. If you don't know what to say, just say, I'm so sorry for the loss of your baby, Trinity or Josiah, or use the child's name. That's the other thing. If they have a name for their child, use their name. We like to hear the name. And I'm praying for you. If you don't know what to say, that's all you have to say. You're not going to say anything wrong or hurtful with that. Good. And then the other big thing is give grace to the mom to skip out on events. If you're going to invite her to a baby shower, especially in the first year after her miscarriage, give her an easy out. Let her know, look, I know you can be happy for other people, but you're still sad for yourself. And we want to give you this invitation, let you feel invited, but you are in no way pressured to come. Or if you want to come, but you need to leave early, we're completely understanding. People just don't think about that if they've never experienced it. And I say that because months after we lost Josiah, I was invited to a small, intimate bridal or baby shower.
Mm-hmm.
And I really didn't want to go. I was happy for them,
Mm-hmm.
but the weekend that they were hosting the baby shower was on the due date of Josiah.
Really? Wow.
And so I felt this huge tension of like needing to have my own emotional boundaries, also not wanting to get there and have an emotional
Mm.
letdown, and then draw attention from the mother to be, So
Mm-hmm.
just be aware if you've had a friend, especially in that first year, if you're going to invite them, give them an out.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make them feel pressured. So I think those are the big things, setting reminders on your phone to just reach out to us on a hard day. And then like us, we have older kids, living kids. And so the people that remembered the fact that we had kids that were hurting too was really nice. So somebody got pink bears for Trinity, and they're the Trinity bears, and we have blue bears, and they're the Josiah bears, and the kids still love them and
Mm-hmm.
snuggle them. And then there's some books that some people have given us for our kids. And so just remember that there's kids, older siblings, they're hurting too. And so it's nice to reach out for them, reach
Yeah.
out to them.
And Chris, you had some strong the don'ts. Do you have some strong do's? Like what can they do on the opposite end? What's
Yeah.
helpful?
People, first of all, the meal train was fantastic. Tyler mentioned that. We had a great group of friends that set up a meal train like 3 times a week for months. And that was amazing because especially if you're further along, remember you're grieving, you're bearing a baby, and you're healing physically. So meal trains, I would say if you want to do something for a family, don't ask what you can do. Just say, hey, I would love to come and do your laundry this week, and I'm available these days. And just say, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Or any kind of like little mementos or memories in memorial gifts are appreciated. Just say the baby's name, check in with them, and really that just praying and letting them know that you're praying is really nice. So I think, like you said earlier, like just the gift of presence. There's nothing you can say,
Right.
to just be present.
Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons why I thought of that is because we, as parents, I think we're already thinking about everything already. We found the solutions, know what God's word says. So doesn't seem like anyone's going to add to that. So what they can do best is be present. And to your point, just kind of, instead of asking, just doing what's
Right.
needed at the time.
And part of that's too, because we are, like I had mentioned earlier, we are, and especially in those raw days, like when it's all new, we are just trying to do the next thing that we have to do, the next hard thing. We don't have the mental capacity or the emotional capacity to think up stuff for you to do for us.
Right. That's
But if you want to take my kids to the park and give them a break from mom who's sobbing, do that. Because I also have guilt the fact that I'm sobbing in the other room and not being a mom, doing fun things with my kids, So, but yeah, we did have people step in and do things like that. My sister had gotten friends together and blessed me with a company to come in and clean the house, a deep clean, which I would never have done for myself. If you're a good friend of the mom, my sister-in-law, ordered me some really cozy pajamas just because we're still healing, and to have some comfortable clothes that are loose fitting, because pregnancy clothes don't really fit us anymore, and they're a terrible reminder that we don't need them anymore. So she just got me some like larger size pajama pants to wear. So just like things like that.
Yeah. No, that's really good. Well, Christy, thank you so much for just sharing again, just your story and your perspective on what it's been like to trust God through such a difficult process. I know it's challenging for a lot of parents, and your story. I mean, I still remember 3 years ago when I saw the post and feeling that empathy and pain of what that was like for you guys, and then for it to happen again, it was just seeing how you guys walked through that and seeing how you guys trusted the Lord through that was impactful for me. So I know that as you're sharing now the ins and outs of everything, I know it's going to be a blessing for people as well who maybe have gone through it, or going through it, or may go through it in the future.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Like I
Yes.
said, anytime we have to share the story of our children, we want to. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they were created with a purpose, and so we want to make sure we tell their story.
Amen to that. Well, Christy, before we close out here, do you have any final words for the audience? Anything that you just like to say or share? Maybe something that I missed, or something that you just wanted to say?
I don't think so. I think we covered most everything. So
Yeah.
I guess the biggest thing that stands out is, for me, thinking back, at least with me, I was noticeably pregnant. And so one week, like going to church, I was pregnant, and one week I was not. And it was very hard to go back. And so for me, it's hard because I'm like, I'm going to see pregnant people. I'm going to see babies. Who's going to be wondering what happened to my belly? Do they know? Do they not know? So whether it's a situation like that you know of somebody that's experienced a loss later on in pregnancy, or maybe just earlier in pregnancy even, like I had mentioned earlier, I just want to emphasize, I guess, is say something. Don't have us wondering if you know or if you care. Say, I'm so sorry, and I'm praying for you.
Yeah. That's good. And I think you alluded to this a number of times throughout, but I just wanted to reemphasize the point that everything that you're feeling, experiencing, thinking, that's all part of the human experience, because I think sometimes people feel guilty for having those thoughts and those feelings. So I think for moms and dads out there to acknowledge and realize that it's normal. You're not off or anything like that, but that's why, as you've been helping us here to understand what it's like to experience that and what we can do to help throughout that process. So I think it's going to be so helpful and a blessing for everyone.
And I think I have one last thing that I just thought of. But for the mom who is struggling to get back out into the community, whether it's in the community at large or on social media, there are babies. Our friends are having babies all the time. And we had, the day that we delivered Trinity, we had 4 friends have babies that same day.
On that same day?
On that same day.
Oh, wow.
And so I knew if I am on social media, it's a chance for Satan to like give me seeds of resentment and jealousy. But I just want to encourage the moms who are grieving, don't let resentment and jealousy creep in. I chose, and I'm really glad I chose to acknowledge that, like, my friends, I'm happy for them, and they have their own stories with grief. Everybody has grief in their life, not just us. And so I'm happy for them. And I chose that day, I was like, I'm going to choose to look at all their baby photos, and like first year, second year, all the birthdays I track with, because that's when Trinity should have been having her birthdays too. But I think one thing that's helped me to not become resentful or jealous is to just offer up breath prayers when we are out in the community and we see a very pregnant lady and we're jealous. Pray for that baby, pray for the health of that mom, and then remove yourself if you need to. But that is one thing that has helped me in a day-to-day type of way to get through some hard moments, or not allow jealousy to really settle inside of me.
Thank you for that. That sounds really good. I know people are going to be blessed by this conversation, blessed by your testimony, and ultimately giving Jesus the glory for how he's walked through this process with you, Tyler. And praying for you guys, praying for your family, and thank you again for doing this.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Sam.